Former Acting Attorney General Sally Yates, testifying to a Senate Judiciary Committee panel, cast a harsh light on the White House this past Monday, detailing how she had informed Trump administration officials that then National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was susceptible to blackmail from Russia. Good morning, I'm Ed James, and this is Black Almanac. The core of her account was that she held 2 meetings with White House counsel McGahn on January 26 and January 27, warning about the dangers pertaining to Flynn. The former Lieutenant General would not resign until February 13th. As Yates portrayed it, she was clear with McGahn that Flynn was compromised. She believed correctly, as it turned out, that Flynn had misled senior figures in the administration, including Vice President Pence, about the nature of his communications with the Russian ambassador to the United States during the transition period. Then came the Tuesday massacre, with the president firing FBI Director Comey. Dr. Lawrence Miller, political analyst, joins the discourse. Dr. Miller, when we last sat at the big table,
yes,
we thought, at least I did, I thought things were going to go well.
mm-hmm.
The investigation would proceed, and it seems like everybody was on page. And I know that the administration probably keep lying, but I thought the investigation would go.
Mm-hmm.
But then this past week, all hell broke loose.
Yes, and thank you again for having me on your show. You're right, all hell broke loose, and what we have today is an investigation in total chaos and conflict. We have a Justice Department that has inserted itself into an investigation that has said that it would not be a part of, in terms of the FBI would be leading it. Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, said that he would recuse himself from being involved in it. And Jeff Sessions is the person who now has gone ahead and sent a letter to the president recommending the removal of the person who was investigating the president.
You're saying this is the same Jeff Sessions who said he had met with his top folk at the in the Justice Department.
Yes.
And they recommended
mm-hmm.
that he remove himself from anything that had to do with the investigation of the president and or his staff.
Yes.
And Russia.
Exactly. And they are trying to lay it off on Rod Rosenstein, who is the Deputy Attorney General, and it just doesn't fly. This whole thing stinks to high heaven.
Doesn't pass the smell test.
No, not at all. It's very funky.
I see you have some correspondence there.
Yes, I have both the Rod Rosenstein letter and the letter that Jeff Sessions sent to President Donald Trump. And if I may, just read a portion of this in terms of letting the public know about what Jeff Sessions had to say. Jeff Beauregard Sessions had to say. As Attorney General, I am committed to a high level of discipline, integrity, and the rule of law to the Department of Justice, an institution that I deeply respect. Based on my evaluation and for the reasons expressed by the Deputy Attorney General in the attached memorandum, I have concluded that a fresh start is needed at the leadership of the FBI. It is essential that this Department of Justice clearly reaffirm its commitment to long-standing principles that ensure the integrity and fairness of federal investigations and prosecutions. The director of the FBI must be someone who follows faithfully the rules and the principles of the Department of Justice and who sets the right example for our law enforcement officials and others in the department. Therefore, I must recommend that you remove Director James B. Comey, Jr. and identify an experienced and qualified individual to lead the great men and women of the FBI.
Now, this letter is to,
This is to President Donald J. Trump. And he is supposed to have, as I mentioned before, recused himself from the investigation of the president by the FBI. Yet here he is recommending to the president the fact that he believes that James Comey should be let go.
well, what we do know is that the president performed what was called the Saturday Night Massacre when
Yes.
President Nixon
Right.
got rid of the
Archibald Cox.
Archibald Cox, the special prosecutor
Yes,
for Watergate.
yes,
Now, and then the man who became famous for saying "you're fired,"
yes.
I think we should share with our audience what he had to say after receiving this letter you just read from Sessions, who was not supposed to be involved,
Right.
according to Sessions.
According to Sessions.
Dear Director Comey, I have received the attached letters from the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General of the United States recommending your dismissal as the Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I have accepted their recommendation, and you are hereby terminated and removed from office effective immediately. While I greatly appreciate your informing me on 3 separate occasions that I am not under investigation, I nevertheless concur with the judgment of the Department of Justice that you are not able to effectively lead the Bureau. It is essential that we find new leadership for the FBI that restores public trust and confidence in its vital law enforcement mission. I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. Donald J. Trump. And this is on the official White House stationery.
Yes.
Now, it's interesting. We need to get someone to help restore public trust and confidence in this vital law enforcement agency.
Yes.
Well, what are we going to do about getting someone to restore vital trust and confidence in the presidency of the United States of America?
Got a good point. Excellent point. And, you know, the interesting thing about this, they delivered this letter to the FBI in Washington, D.C., while the director was in California. Now, the president called a number of members of Congress to let them know this was going to happen before he sent this letter over. He didn't give any thought to going ahead. Well, let me back up. Maybe he gave thought, but he didn't take any action to call Comey before the press got it, so that the press wouldn't be informing him that he's fired while he's giving a lecture. He's looking at it on television. He's thinking it's a joke, right?
And laughed.
And laughed. And here it is. This is serious business where he has been terminated and doesn't even know it because he hasn't been given the grace, the courtesy and the graciousness to go on ahead and tell him before this gets to the press.
Well, you know, as the old folk would say, this stinks to high heavens.
Oh, yes. Yes, it does. And I'm so concerned about this situation, especially as it relates to, couldn't they have just as well waited if they wanted to do this after the Inspector General, who's doing an investigation on these very issues that Rod Rosenstein brought out as far as the investigation of the actions of Director Comey?
Of course they could.
And these same actions that he's talking about in his letter are the same actions that in October, before the election, that candidate Donald Trump was praising. Told everybody that he had a lot of guts, that he had a lot of respect for the director of the FBI because he took this action. Then even as when he became president of the United States, Donald Trump went ahead and said that he has confidence in the director of the FBI no more than a week ago. So what happened in these 7 days that now all the things that Rosenstein is talking about, things that happened already?
Maybe what happened, just speculating here, is that the president found out that Comey had gone to some members of Congress asking for more resources.
Yes.
And he had to explain what he needed more resources for to further the investigation of President Trump and his staffers in all things Russian.
Yes, yes. And, you know, the interesting thing, even though he has been terminated, okay, it doesn't mean he's been silenced. I understand that Mark Warner and Richard Burr, the Republican and the Democrat, respectively, have asked, in terms of the Senate investigation of what we're talking about, the Russian involvement in our election, have asked Director Comey, former Director Comey, to come to the Senate Investigation Committee and speak to these issues on
this Tuesday.
This Tuesday.
When we talk about what he does and what he doesn't do, nobody knows. It's like the fair, round and round it goes, and nobody knows where she stops.
Right.
But the president, when you talk about integrity and firing people,
Yes.
now all this happened this past Tuesday. On Monday,
Right.
former Attorney General Yates came before the Senate
Yes.
to testify.
Right.
It is interesting that they tried to silence her early on, and until the people weren't having that anymore.
Right.
And when she came, she laid out the blueprint, at least for who knew what and when they knew it. Who knew and when did they know?
Right.
But let's go beyond what she, before we get into that, let's talk about when Trump became president.
Yes.
A day after the election,
Okay.
the former president, Obama, sat down with President Trump for 90 minutes. And they had a discussion.
Yes.
And he told him that you need to stay away from Flynn and what he was doing.
Yes.
And then when things started getting a little messy in the last couple of weeks,
Yes.
Trump's people, especially Spicer, his PR person, tried to put all this on former President Obama.
Isn't that something? I mean, you know, talk about integrity, right? The issue that you're bringing up is very important in this whole process because he, despite talking about Donald Trump, despite what President Obama said to him, went ahead with his appointment of Michael Flynn, General Michael Flynn, as National Security Advisor. And for those 18 days that he was the National Security Advisor, he met with different leaders. He held press conferences talking about Iran and what the United States may do. And they just gave no credence to what the former president had said, nor did they give any credence to what the Department of Justice said revolving around General Flynn. Sally Yates was magnificent.
Yes, she was.
She went ahead and gave chapter and verse on this issue. And for the most part, in watching that, I could see that the questions that the Republicans had centered more around leaking than it did around the fact that General Flynn was compromised as far as his duties and responsibilities as National Security Advisor.
Well, some of them during that hearing are still trying to save Trump, still trying to save no matter what he does.
Yes.
And one of the things that I continually get disturbed about, they will tell us, well, it's just Trump. It's just Trump being Trump. Can you go and say and do something stupid and it's just Miller?
Right.
Miller
Exactly.
being Miller?
Miller being Miller. Right.
I don't think so.
No, not at all.
They have lowered the bar as low as it can go. And I don't think an ant can get under the bar so low because it's on the floor.
That's a good point.
And they keep trying to sell that
Yes.
to the American people.
Exactly. And the thing to me here is, when does it kick in, right, that you care more about the American people than you do your party or the power that comes along with what you're doing at this particular point in time? In other words, they say, there's an old saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes.
The thing here is that if you see something wrong, and this is what I hope, even with the people, not the appointed political people, but the civil service people of the FBI, that they come forward, that they do their jobs, that they put the country first and go ahead and get to the bottom of this situation. I know it's going to be difficult because they're going to have political appointees over them, whoever is appointed by the president. But they still have an obligation and responsibility to this country.
Let's talk about appointees. The director, Sessions, who said that he would not be involved, they have appointed the deputy director of the FBI to head it temporarily.
Yes.
The deputy director is under investigation. Under investigation about what happened in political campaign and what he did in influencing his wife getting something.
Right.
Isn't
Andrew
it,
McCabe.
yeah, isn't it interesting?
Very interesting.
That almost everybody you touch is under investigation.
Yes. And I think they're going to do whatever they can to get out the people, talking about the Trump administration, get out the people that were associated with Comey and get their own people into the FBI, which politicizes the FBI, which is another institution that we rely upon to not be political. Okay? You know, when they fired Sally Yates, and it turned out that Sally Yates was absolutely right when it came to the executive order that President Trump put out revolving around immigration, they tried to, at this Senate hearing that you mentioned, they tried to vilify her. They tried to make it seem like you're supposed to follow whatever the president tells you to follow in terms of the executive orders, the lawful orders that he put forward. These are the same people who, when Barack Obama was president, asked her to whether she would defy the president and not follow if she felt that it wasn't in the interest of justice.
And she said, of course.
Of course. And she followed that up. And Ted Cruz tried to vilify her revolving around this, and she chopped him up. Okay? So, you know, when you have these institutions that are supposed to be as pure as the driven snow, right, that we rely upon based upon their integrity, their discipline, their professionalism, and now you politicize them. It's okay for the legislature to be politicized. It's okay for even the executive branch to be politicized. But the judiciary and the law enforcement agencies, especially the Department of Justice, should not be politicized. That is the essential part of freedom and liberty in any country. And when you do that, what you're doing is bringing down, you say a democracy, and we're the leading country as far as the free world is concerned, you bring down the stature of the United States when you do that.
You know, since they finally got rid of Flynn, some of his minions that he brought along are still there.
Yes.
So we're still feeling the influence of Flynn after Flynn is gone.
Yes.
And the now Lieutenant General McMaster's, they're scheming against him, who took Flynn's spot.
Flipbot.
And Steve Bannon and company.
Yeah, Steve Bannon and company. There's still this fight within the administration as to who's going to win the ear of the president, and it seems like Steve Bannon is winning at this point from Breitbart and the alt-right perspective. But you know, this all is predicated on, especially as far as President Trump is concerned, his victory in November, as to his ability to be strong, to be a strong leader, to be decisive. Okay, there's different ways to be that way. Look at France. France went ahead and elected a young man who's a centrist rather than Marie Le Pen, who was more like Trump.
The Trump of France.
Yes, the Trump of France, who was pushing a lot of the things that Trump is pushing over here in the United States. And they rejected that. And they've had more terrorist attacks within the past 6 months at a much higher level than the United States. But yet the people of France threw Marie Le Pen out. Okay? So when we start thinking about what's happening going forward, especially the elections in terms of 2018, people better take very good notice of what's happening as far as our institutions are concerned here in the United States. We need to start thinking about what kind of country we're going to leave for our children when these institutions, as I mentioned before, have now become so politicized based upon the access to power, that power is more important than patriotism.
You say people better take very good notice, and I agree with you. I look at what the President Trump, when he had black presidents of the black colleges, then he says he may not support them because he was ticked off after many of the alumni and students at Bethune-Cookman University got upset that his director of education had been invited by BCU's president to give the commencement address.
Exactly.
And then when we started kicking back, he says, no, that's not what I mean. I love HBCUs. If you believe, is that a chameleon? Is that the one who can turn colors?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I know.
A moment's notice.
Yeah, and because I remember as a little boy, we would call them lizards. And we used to have somebody say, lizard, lizard, show me your blanket.
Yeah.
Talking to the lizards, which was another form of the chameleon, because they would change colors.
Right, right.
We had better be careful of the chameleons that we want to support.
Exactly, exactly.
And it is an absolute insult, I believe, to bring Betsy DeVos, the current Secretary of Education, to BCU to give a commencement address.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you and to take life with those who have disagreed with the invitation for me to be here.
Ms. Bethune, I don't know if you've heard it, but at some point I want to share it with people who haven't on this program. She left her last will and testament. And in that, Mrs. Bethune mentioned, earthly things I have not many. This is what she's leaving to the school,
Yes.
the university.
Right.
But I hope you will remember that I tried to teach you integrity,
Yes.
dignity, and teach you how to do much with little.
Right.
Now, and it goes on and on and on, saying that I can't give you money and all of these things and stuff, but I can teach you how to be great human beings
Yes.
and move forth and take what little you have and take it and make something of it.
Yes.
And for President of BCU to invite her is an absolute shame, because she stands for everything
Just on the opposite of that.
of Mrs. Bethune.
Yeah, and you know, you hit the nail on the head in terms of this situation, especially as it relates to wanting to get something from, you know, the government, get something from the Department of Education, get something from the Trump administration by this president. Really, that's what it's all about. It's just one hand washing the other type of thing. But integrity calls for you to be able to stand by your principles and values despite, you know, the temptations that you may receive from those who would want to give you money or power and what have you, because you believe in what you believe in. And that, I think, is a problem. And that's the problem that you're pointing up right now, because these HBCUs were founded by not just Bethune-Cookman, but a bunch of them were put together by the fact that African Americans wanted an education when they were denied an education
And had no place else to go.
No place else to go in terms of the majority schools.
Dr. Miller, we have to obey the clock on the wall.
Okay.
But I'd like to thank you again for stopping by and sharing with our viewers. And this is not going away.
No, it's not going away.
And hope you'll come back soon.
I look forward to it, and I also hope to talk about the Sarasota City Commission and the new commissioners that were just elected. Congratulations to them.
And as always, have a great day, Suncoast.
Everything all right?
Actually, you know how Tom had knee surgery?
Sure.
We found out Brad's been taking his painkillers. And it turns out he's been doing it for a while.
Most people don't know what to say about drugs, but we do. Visit us at drugfree.org.
ABC 7, your Suncoast News, weeknights at 5.